Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our annual planning session here on the lab. It's January 8th, and we have maybe, I don't know, a dozen people here with us live. I'm sure more people will hop in, hop off over the next hour. So some of you have already gone through this process with me. Others, you've done quarterly planning with me. So you will see things today that you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember we talked about this already. We've seen this already. But I think it's never, a bad thing to repeat this because you always learn something new during these sessions, or sometimes we're always in a different place, right? At every quarter, things evolve, change. So something that maybe wasn't resonating with us in the last quarter, it'll resonate with you today. I do have a couple of more templates that I put in there, especially for budgeting, since we'll be talking about that. So that might help a few of you. What else did I want to say before starting? For those of you who consider yourself allergic to planning, I just want to remind you all that this is there's not a right and a wrong way to do this. I'm sharing with you today different ways to think about it, but I do invite you to commit to the process, even if you don't do it. Not like it's not a perfect science. Like what I'm sharing with you today is not like the perfect way. It's a way that I've elaborated throughout the years, doing it in the corporate sector, nonprofit sector, doing it for art galleries where I work, and now doing it for artists. But really the idea is to commit to the process. You don't have to make it perfect right here within the next 2 weeks of January. Otherwise, your entire year is going to, collapse. That's not what I think. But what I want for you is more to develop that reflex of taking a step back and really thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because that's really when you'll start noticing some patterns. You'll notice also things that are going better, and giving you some tools to grow things that are already working for you. Because you all have things that are working for you, but if you don't really take the time to take a step back and observe, and then plan ahead, then that's when you feel like, maybe money is just like, you don't have any money anytime, you don't even know where to invest, but really you feel like you're spending, but you're not really getting any return. So those are all the things that I want us to think about today. So just let's have an open heart, open mind. I'm here to answer your questions. I don't want to take too much time with the slides, because really I'm happy to do some Q&A with you guys. So if you're here live and you want to do Q&A, and even while I'm talking, I'll have my chat open. So if you just want to comment on what I'm saying, or just ask a specific question on what I'm saying, don't hesitate. And if you're not here and you're watching a replay, we'll have plenty of opportunities to debrief together on any questions you might have, whether it's on the Facebook group, during a Q&A call, or during office hours. Okay, so plenty of time. Nobody needs to be, but I understand sometimes that after this session, it's kind of too soon to ask questions. We'll have time. And there's, like I was saying at the beginning, there's no rush, okay? Take the time that you need, because it's gonna pay in the long term. Okay, so enough about that. We have new people who are joining us, so welcome everyone. Nice to see you all. Just let's get started, and I'll share my screen right away. Voila. Okay, you guys can see my screen? Yes. And where is the chat? Oh, there it is. I'll try to bring the chat here. Why is the chat hiding in the background? I'll bring it here. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So you are in the right place if you're looking to listen to the annual planning strategic planning session that we're having today. Okay, so what we'll talk about, the difference between what is annual planning, quarterly goal setting, and biweekly sprints. We talked about this a few times during quarterly calls, but now really today we're going to really focus on annual planning. Okay, we're going to remind you to debrief and learn on your experiences, getting clear on where you want to be at the end of this year, and set the table for an amazing 2020. It's not going to be all done at the end of this, because I'm not going to pause so that you can do the exercises. But what I do suggest maybe is for you to take some notes and maybe just to create for you like a little to-do list that you could maybe identify 1, 2, 3 areas that we'll talk about today. That could be your to-do list for your planning over the next week or month. So one thing that's going to be really important before we leave is that you commit, right, to a time in your schedule. Maybe it's a 90 minutes session by yourself with an accountability partner, just to go through the different parts of the planning, because it's not just about listening to me talk, but it's actually about you doing that planning. Okay, so my keys to success. I've been teaching this for 5 years, and I think this is the only slide that's never changed. Focus, consistency, action. If I was speaking to a different audience, I think I would say the same thing. You know, the term focused, I learned, well, I knew what it meant, but I learned when I was working for a very, how can I say, for a CEO whose business was just like skyrocketing, and when we went and did roadshows and met with investors or analysts or journalists, they always asked him, what is the secret to your success? And he said, always focus. Consistency, I learned from artists, working with artists, on how, when I look at the artists who succeed and the ones who maybe have a little more difficulty, the common denominator for the ones who succeed is definitely consistency. And action really comes from seeing so many people, including myself a few years back, having like analysis paralysis. So waiting for everything to be perfect to show up. And really what I've noticed is that, well, first, things are never going to be perfect, and things are only going to be better if you take action and you show up. You can always iterate, you can always make it better. If you keep waiting for things to be perfect before showing up, you're going to feel behind all the time. And the truth is, it's never going to be good enough. So at some point, we just need to take action and put ourselves out there. So again, anytime you have a comment, a question, it's been so many times that I've given, this training or parts of this training, that I don't want anyone to feel like I'm going too quickly. I know this stuff, so please, if you have questions, just type them in the chat box, or just say I have a question and I'll unmute you and we can chat, okay? So annual, quarterly, bi-weekly. So today we're really concentrating on annual. So you'll see I'll have subtitles for each item here, and we'll go through them one by one. And then the quarterly aspect, I'll go through them pretty quickly at the end, because we are also, this month it's kind of a dual planning, because we need to do annual planning, and then we need to decide specifically in Q1 what's going to happen. So we'll talk about that at the end. And if you feel like you need to dig deeper on quarterly planning because you don't remember, or you haven't really joined us for other sessions, you can always go back in the members area and look at that specific section of our last quarterly call. And then bi-weekly sprints or weekly sprints, that's what we do in the Facebook group. That's what we do with our office hours. So happy to support you on a continuous basis here. So this slide, I sometimes put it at the end, sometimes I put it at the beginning, but I thought that today we should put it at the beginning just to set the table on what it is exactly that we're going to be planning, okay? So we can only plan the parts that we control. And coming from a control freak like me, this is something that took a while for me to kind of integrate. And there are some days that I still have these challenges. So I understand if that's a challenge for you too, but really today what we want is really to focus on the elements that you control, okay? What the mindset you show up with, the commitment. I said yesterday that the word commitment was going to come up a lot today, so I'm just going to start already. The commitment that you put into a project, into your business, to your career, right? The planning, right? The execution, how much money you're investing in the business, how you're showing up in terms of your brand, how you're showing up with your pricing and your sales strategy, the sales conversations, the customer journey that you're trying to create, how your customers feel. Those are the parts that you control. And that's really the aspects that I want you to focus on when you're working on your plan. It doesn't mean that you can't say, well, for me being successful, I would need 3 galleries representing me. So, but what we're going to focus on, if that's your desired outcome, that's fine. I'm not saying that you can't have a desired outcome that you don't control, but what we need to focus on is the aspects that you control, right? For the gallery representation, because you don't control if the gallery is taking on new artists, is interested in the work that you do, etc. But you do control how many contacts you develop, how engaging you are, the quality of the work you put out, the quality of the images, etc. So I think you get what I'm trying to say. So let's stop focusing on the things we don't control, because that's really also when we start having this like victim role, right? Everything's not working, blah, blah, blah. That's usually when we start having those victim negative self-talk happening in our heads, is because number one, we're tired, we're not taking good care of ourselves. And second, it's usually also because we're looking at the aspects that we don't control instead of focusing on what we do. Okay. So here I'm going to go super quickly because I talk about this all the time. It's in the Facebook group. You can screenshot this if you want. And you know what? It's super important taking the time to debrief. Like if you need to choose just one thing, I don't recommend you do just one thing, but if you were going to do just one thing after this call and nothing else, I would recommend that you debrief on your year, because that's really all the information that you need to make the right decisions are there. But if you're not taking the time to look at the data, look at the information, look at how it feels, right? The head, the heart, right? Then of course you feel like you're in the dark. And of course then you're thinking, why isn't Catherine telling me what to do? I want Catherine to tell me what to do. The answers aren't within Catherine. The answers are within the information from your experience, because you're all very different. You all have different goals and you all have different ways of reaching your goals. We talked about, and I know this comes up regularly in the lab, and we had a quick conversation about this in office hours yesterday about, I'm afraid that if I look at my numbers, that I'm going to find that it's all messed up and it's all, you know what? So what? That's because you're putting judgment in your debriefing. You're judging yourself as you're writing your debrief, or as you're looking at your numbers and your sales or your expenses. You need to there's your career, there's your business, and then there's you. If you need to distance yourself from that, you are not, I'm sorry, I still have a cold, and I'm sorry if I'm talking a bit on my nose. I'm doing my best. You need to distance yourself from it. Okay, you are not your business. The business is not you. And you know what? You just need to take responsibility, because it's okay if your numbers were messed up in the past. It's not okay knowing that you invested in the lab, knowing that you have the support at your fingertips in so many ways to continue in this situation. Because um, the first the first step to changing your situation is to acknowledge it, right? Even if you don't do anything else about it, at least if you know that's what's going on, it will consciously or subconsciously change the way that you take action in the future. So Brian says, I know my numbers are all messed up. That's why I'm here. Exactly, right? So it's fine. Like, we all have things that we're better at and things that we're not so good at. And that's exactly, you're right, Brian. Like, if you had it all figured out, what's the point? But also, if you're not ready to take, some time to have a look and understand what's going on, then what's the point of being here, right? It's just, again, staying in that victim mode. So I all want you to commit today that, the thing that you the least want to look at, that's what you're going to be looking at first. Okay, let's pull off the Band-Aid. If it's the numbers, it's the numbers. If it's expenses, it's the expenses. If it's how you're showing up, it's how you're showing up. It's totally fine. There's no judgment here. We're only here to look forward. And then planning for the new year, okay? So mission and vision journaling. I'm not gonna go through everything that has to do with the vision and the mission. You can go back to the quarterly call we did last month. It's all explained there with a nice little graphic. But this is just to help you. So if once you've done the debrief, you're like, okay, but I still don't know where I'm headed this year, then you can answer these questions. It's going to help you. And these questions, you don't necessarily have to answer them all. Do answer the ones who annoy you the most, because those are usually the ones that'll give you the most insight. Now, SWOT analysis. I recommend doing this once a year, because maybe even maybe once every other year. Like, you can look, if you've done it last year, and you look at it and you can just look at what you did last year and see, like, is it still relevant? Are they things that have evolved? But in a strategic planning process, it's like, this is like a super old analysis. I've heard about a lot and learned about a lot of new and different ways of doing it, but it all comes down to the same thing, okay? Identifying your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and the threats. Just to give you a better understanding of what that means. So basically, you take any sheet of paper, you just put 4 parts in it, SWOT, and then you just brainstorm. Now, what are your strengths, right? Are you a great people person? Are you great at closing sales calls? I remember working with an artist who said to me, anyone who comes into my studio leaves with something. I'm a really great closer. I'm not so good at getting people to come, but when they do come, I'm a closer. Okay, so that's an example. So strengths, right? I'm really good on social media. I'm really good at the art that I create. I'm really good in building connections. I'm really good with numbers, etc., etc. Weaknesses, well, clearly it's the opposite. So the strengths and the weaknesses. Oh, Kathleen says, I need to practice my closing. Love talking about closing. So definitely something we can do either on the Facebook group or during another call. Kathleen, this is something that you know that I love talking about. So strengths and weaknesses, okay? Internal to your business, to you, right? Most of you are your business. So strengths and weaknesses is internal. Now, if we look at opportunities and threats, those are external, okay? So, well, okay, Jessica says, yeah, I just realized one of my biggest stress is potential burnout. Okay, So usually threats are external, and I'll tell you where I see the burnout in the SWOT analysis, okay? So usually opportunities and threats are external. So opportunities will be, there's a gallery like there's a new district opening up in my area, there's going to be plenty of galleries, maybe an opportunity for me here. Or, you know, I've been growing my social media, I have a lot of influential people following me, there's maybe something there that could be done. Or, you know, I'm producing much quicker than before because I have a new technique, so I'm going to have more work out there. Okay, those could be opportunity, like it's more external. Actually, the last example I gave that I have a new technique would be a strength. Threats are also external. You know, 3 years ago when I was in Miami, I think it was like 30 galleries that had closed in the last 6 months. Well, that's a threat, right? Maybe there's a grant that you're used to receiving and it's been cut, right? Maybe the fact that you're reaching less people on social media is a threat. Okay, now to answer Jessica's question, who says, I'm realizing one that my biggest threat is potential burnout. Burnout is not a threat, right? Burnout is not like lurking in the corner of your office and just like there and wanting to jump on you, right? So what we need to we need to figure out, Jessica, is what is that root of possible burnout? What is causing personal potential burnout? Is it because you're putting way too much pressure? You're not good at delegating. You're not maybe the best person to organize, or you're just trying to do too many things at the same time. Maybe the threat, maybe it's a threat if it's, I used to have, okay, so I've seen this. I used to have a boss at my day job, not me, but I'm just giving an example that I've seen. I used to have a boss at my day job who gave me a lot of flexibility in terms of how to manage my calendar. And if I had to go and meet some clients, I could go back and forth as long as my work was done. Oops, that boss is gone, new boss comes in, and now I don't have that flexibility anymore. So that's a threat, right? And it could lead to burnout because all of a sudden the flexibility that I had, I don't have anymore. So now this new situation that is outside of me, it has nothing to do with, like I'm still meditating, I'm still doing the self-care, again, just examples here, but it's something outside of me that is this threat because it's going to change the way that used to be an opportunity, right? Having this boss that was very flexible was an opportunity for me to keep my job plus build my business, and now all of a sudden my day job becomes a threat because it's keeping me from growing the business. Jessica says this makes sense. Anybody else have questions about SWOT analysis? Let me know. I'm happy to answer. So I'm not done, just so that you know, like what I really want you to focus on is strengths and opportunities, okay? Of course, we need to look at weaknesses. Of course, we need to be clear on what our threats are, but really for your plan, right? You're not in industry with a bit, well, yes, it is a competitive industry, but what I mean by that is you're going to be able to, right now, most of you are in a place in your business where there's still so much that you can build on through your strengths and through the opportunities that, going too deep into the threats is sometimes just depressing, and it's not really going to support your projects for now. So Jessica says, maybe more in a weakness category, unwillingness to acknowledge self-care as critical to business growth. Oh yeah, that resonates with me so much. So much. And we had this conversation also before the holidays about, getting sick and not taking care of ourselves. And guess who spent 2 weeks sick during the holidays? Me. So really resonated with me. And you guys, I thought about you guys more than you can imagine because of that. From someone who put self-care like not even on my list, and it led to health collapse. So please bump it up high, Jessica. Yes. So yeah, and I think we're all like that. Like we need to put self-care, but most of us weren't raised that way. We were raised to push, 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 and our self-worth and self-validation comes from the output. Yet, when most of us journal on what success means to us, it's rarely about the output. So there's such a disconnect between. That's why I encourage you to journal regularly on what success means to you, because you are closer to your success than what success is than you think. And sometimes we put way too much energy on things that are not even part of what success means to us. Most of us will put, time for self-care. If I'm successful, I'll have time for self-care. But really, if you don't start now, it's not going to change just because you're making a bit more money or you have more recognition. Okay, planning for the new year, SWOT analysis plus identifying gaps. I hope I'm not bursting anyone's bubble by being human and telling you that I'm not perfect and I have my challenges too. Okay, so how can you build on your strengths? How can you alleviate your weaknesses? How can you leverage opportunities? How can you mitigate threats? Okay, so basically, those are the questions you can ask yourself after doing the SWOT analysis, okay? Basically, these will help you identify the gaps, because basically, next step is going to be to identify your desired outcomes. So you do the SWOT analysis. You see where I'm going with this? It's very linear, right? We're doing the SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is basically, it's a snapshot of where your business is at right now. Then we're going to do desired outcomes, and really the plan is bridging that gap between where your business is at and where you want to take it. So what's keeping you from reaching your desired outcomes? It's probably building on your strengths, alleviating your weaknesses, leveraging opportunities, and mitigating threats. But some of the things you'll put in your snapshot maybe won't relate to your desired outcomes, so you won't need to focus on them. It's not, don't think that everything you put in the SWOT analysis needs to be is all on the same equal playing field, right? We'll decide where there are gaps and where we need to bridge them. Okay, makes sense? SWOT analysis, we're good? Because I'm going to move on to next. Okay, so guiding word or theme and broad desired outcomes. So this is very popular. What's your word, right, for 2020? And I think it's pretty cool to do that. Some people recommend 3 words, so that when you have a decision to make, you can choose. It needs to fit at least 2 of those 3 words, right? I don't recommend 2, because 2 is usually in opposition with the other, okay? So either if one makes sense, like one just emerges and is really, like, it's just like, for me, it was very, very clear what it was. So it just emerged and that's it. And I don't want to add, because also this year I want to, like, I just feel 3 is going to be cluttered for me. But if one doesn't make sense, then go for the triangle. Okay, triangle can work as well. And then those words can be translated also into 1 to 3 desired outcomes for the year. So what I like to suggest as an exercise is seeing yourself during the holidays in 2020 with a loved one, a friend, a partner, a family member. The person asks you, how was your year? And you say, it was fabulous because 1, 2, 3. those are your broad desired outcomes for the year. Okay, it doesn't have to go more specific than that. It's just like this year was amazing because of these three things, and then we'll break them down for the quarterly goals. Okay. So here again, the word commitment, and no, it's not my word for this year, but commitment I think is really, really important in this case, because we can be chatting, tapping, and then if you close the computer and you're not committed to you don't have to be committed to me, but you need to be committed towards yourself, towards your business. And if it's like, oh, well, I'll do this, but I won't do that. I'm willing to do this, but I'm not willing to do that. Every time that it's a little more difficult or it keeps you out of your comfort zone, it's always like, I'm not even sure I want to do this. Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know either, like how it's going to lead to something for you. So commitment is really, really important here. So if you're writing down 3 desired outcomes, I'm not saying it shouldn't be scary. It can be scary. Shouldn't be stressful though. Can be scary, but not stressful. But it's about committing. Just want to see what, oh my God, I'm chatting, I'm talking, and time is going by fast. Okay. So you have your guiding word or words. You have your broad desired outcomes, right? Now we want to start planning projects and budgets, right? Because remember, right, we did our snapshot, and now we know, like, between our desired outcomes and where our business is at, we know what the gaps are. We identified the gaps. So now we can go into planning projects and budgets. Why am I talking about that now? Well, because the way you're going to plan your budgets and your projects is based on what you found in the last 2 exercises, right? Maybe you notice that you need to hire someone to help you, or you need a marketing budget, or you need to be more out there next year, or et cetera, et cetera. So that needs to be mapped out and budgeted. If you're thinking, I don't have a marketing budget, well, when you're going to look at your numbers for 2019, you might notice a $50 here, a $25 there, $10 here, $200 here. And when you put it all together, you'll realize that you spent $2,500, but it wasn't strategic because it was just thrown right, left, center, whatever was coming at you. Now what I want you is to be proactive, to sit down and really look at how you're going to invest your money so that you get an actual return on your investment, that it actually bridges a gap, that it actually helps you moving forward. So this is an example. I know yesterday there was a budget website shared very quickly. I saw it when we were doing office hours, but because my computer was just showing me 4 comments at a time. Julia, I don't know if you mind sharing it again in the chat. So Julia shared an app to help you do your budgeting. So you can screenshot this. This is just an example of how you can do budgeting. Julia shared an app that really helped her. YouNeedABudget.com. Thank you, Julia. So it's really about just getting a budget done for the year, and then keeping track of where you're at during the year. But when you have it on paper like this, it makes it much easier to do. So just going through this really quickly, how I recommend, so you can put here your income stream. So income streams here could be different. Maybe you have different partners, right? So you can have different galleries, or maybe you have different categories, right? Your prints versus your commissions versus something else. Maybe you have services, events that you want to put in there. So different sales channels. So this is how you can structure your different revenues, and then you can put projection based on, you know, the project calendar that you developed here. And then it's going to give you numbers, right? And numbers are just numbers. We don't judge them. If you're like, well, that's not enough. Okay, well, it's not just about boosting the numbers here. It's also about looking at, okay, well, if I want to sell more, maybe I need to invest more here, right? What is it that I need to do? It's not about just putting numbers out there. If it's the first time you're doing this, yeah, some of it will be just playing it by ear, trying to see where it's at, and it's fine, right? I made projections last year. The results that I got were, the end number was close to what I had projected, but the way that it happened evolved during the year, right? And it's totally fine. We learn, but at least we have a baseline to make our decision. So when I made a decision to pivot for something else, I knew what I was letting go of or what I was going to tweak to change it. So just having it on paper gives you so much more information. And here, expenses, so it can be education. For example, the lab can be considered in your education. If you have travel, marketing materials you want to develop, or you want to do Facebook ads or something like that. Your materials, obviously, tech tools, if you need a new computer this year, if you're paying for an email service, a website, things like that. Your studio, salary, this is what you're paying yourself. Other expenses, so maybe you're paying for an assistant, or other expenses that you have. And then here, so for each quarter, and then total for the year, and then your profit, revenues minus expenses equals profit. So if you put your salary here, then your profit is really just money that's left in the business that you can reinvest. If you don't put your salary in there, maybe you pay yourself with the profits. But I do recommend that you start training yourself of paying yourself a salary. Okay, it's not, I'm selling a painting $1,000. Oh, I got $1,000. That's not how it works. Money needs to go back into the business. Okay, so that's why doing it this way can be very helpful. If you have questions about budgeting, what's a standard salary to start with? Well, it's very different for everybody, and I think it's about you looking at, maybe you could do a first, Brian, a first exercise of looking at, what it was last year, and then seeing how maybe you can start to increase, because obviously people doing it part-time, full-time, it depends where you're living. If you're living in San Francisco versus living in a rural area, the cost of life is different. Some of you, are just looking at being able to pay yourself a small salary because you have other income coming in. So it's really different. So maybe you have this, we all have this number that we'd like to reach, right? And then once we reach it, which is like, what was that? I want more, but whatever. So maybe you could start with that. Like, what is, and that's what we were also talking about with Jessica yesterday, knowing if you don't know what your expenses are really, what money is coming in, what is coming out, it's really hard to decide what is a good salary for you, right? So starting with where maybe your ultimate goal, and then saying, okay, well, within 3-5 years, can I reach it? And then reverse engineer and say, okay, well, this year, maybe I give myself a 10%. If I give myself a 10% increase, where is it that I need to move things or do more in the projected revenues, or do I need to cut some expenses, or actually do I need to invest more to get more? Okay. I'm saying a lot of different things, Brian, but hopefully let me know if this makes sense for you. But it's really about, because we all have this number that we want to reach. I know for me it was, when I started my business, I wanted to reach the same level of revenue I was getting, not revenue, but salary that I was having in my corporate job, right? But I knew it wasn't going to happen. So it took me 3 years to get there, right? So 3 years. So I reverse engineer what it was. Okay. Okay. So you see here, Kathleen did the math. So if she sells 40,000 a year, then she can pay herself $1,200 a month. So if she pays herself, and then don't forget also, depending on where you live, what the taxes are, you need to set aside money for taxes. Usually if you pay yourself, the salary taxes are in there. So that means 36. So that means no, that means, so if you're paying yourself 1,200 euros a month, I'm so good with mental accounting. Let me just see what that means. So 1,200, where's my calculator? So 1,200 euros times 12 is 40. So that means, so minus 40,000, that means that, you know, Kathleen knows that she needs to invest about $25,000 in her, like her business costs her to operate $25,000 a year. And so with 40,000, she can pay herself, yeah, she can pay herself 1,200, and then the rest goes in operating the business, paying taxes, etc., etc. Okay. Yeah, lots of taxes here in Quebec too. I think, Brian, the idea is like to start with last year and then see how you can increase every year, right? And it's not just about putting a number out there and then being disappointed, right? It's looking at, okay, if I want that number, how am I going to reach it? So reverse engineering it. Choosing metrics, keeping track of results, and pivoting. So what data do I want to need to keep track of? So maybe for some of you, it's going to be tracking your, you know, revenues and expenses. I mean, that one is kind of a given. Like, you can't really operate your business if you're not tracking your revenues and expenses. But then what else, right? For those of you who focus on growing your audience, that might be what you want to track. If you want to focus on, you know, getting gallery representation, maybe you want to track how many times you, how many portfolios you send, or how many conversations you have, right? Maybe you'll notice that, you know, you're starting to have a trend that for every, you know, 20 gallery owner you talk to, you're able to get a show. So maybe next year, if you want to get 3 shows, you're like, okay, I need to approach 60 galleries. Again, it's not perfect science, but it gives you some information to work from. So what are you going to keep track of? How are you going to keep track of it? Are you going to have a board in your office? Are you going to have an Excel spreadsheet? Are you going to keep track of it in your favorite notebook? I don't really care how you do it, but you need to commit on one way of doing it. And then when will you take some time to look at those numbers? Is it on a monthly basis, quarterly basis? You know, when I hear people telling me, oh, at the end of the year, oh no, it's crazy, I need to do my taxes, I need to go through all my receipts and do a spreadsheet. And I'm like, well, first, of course, that's crazy because it's going to take you forever. And second, like, how come you don't know what happened during the year and it's all in a box? So, because at the end of the year, it's a little bit late to tweak and pivot, right? So the more, and I'm not saying that you should be looking at, you know, your invoices every evening after dinner, but having like this rendezvous with yourself on a weekly or monthly basis is important. Okay, so oops, sorry. Okay, so we did the annual planning. Okay, so basically annual planning, guiding word, broad desired outcomes. No, what am I saying? Debriefing, visioning journal, SWOT analysis, broad desired outcomes, guiding word, and then project planning and budgeting. Okay. Now we're going to move into quarterly planning. Are there any questions about annual planning? You can ask me later if you don't have a question coming up now, but if you do, before I move on, I'm happy to answer. Brian says, for someone like me who is just starting with these metrics, what's a good amount of time for data collections before looking at them? For me, like I would say, have a look at them. Well, it depends on, okay, depends on the data, and it depends on how much energy you're going to put into it to uh, to move the needle. Okay, so I would say like monthly. I think a monthly debrief on your data is more than enough. But here's an example where you could decide that you're looking at them more closely. If you have, let's say you launch a new print series and you decide that you're going to do a big, social media campaign, you're maybe going to have some ads, you're going to have maybe a live event, things like that. Well, maybe your launch or your promo lasts 3 weeks. So maybe every 3 to 5 days, you want to check in on your data. You don't want to put a Facebook ad out for 3 weeks and never look at it again because, you check your data once a month. You're spending that money. So maybe after 3-4 days, you want to look at how your ads are performing. Is it driving traffic to your website? Are people looking at your at your prints? Are people opening up your emails so that you can tweak or pivot your strategy in time to get the results that you want? So on an ongoing basis, I would say monthly is more than enough. But there might be, Brian, some situations where you're doing like a real push. You have a show, you have a launch, you have something going on where it requires looking at the data a little bit more frequently so that you can pivot and you don't end up at the end saying, oh, wow, there was a problem here, but I only knew it at the end and now I can't do anything about it. April says, I use HubDoc to take photos of all my receipt and invoices as they come, which works with QuickBooks, so no need for dealing with receipts at end of quarter year. Yes, a lot of tools now, you just take a picture of your receipt, and I'm lucky I have Suzanne for that. Suzanne does it for me, but we're not in the same city, so I do the same thing. So every month I take pictures of all my receipts, I send it to her, and she does my bookkeeping. It really depends on how you want to manage it. But like for me, bookkeeping once a month, it's changed my life. I wouldn't go back to doing it quarterly. Any other question about that comes up right now about annual planning as I move into quarterly planning? So all of this I've talked about already. There's no wrong time to ask a question, by the way. So if your question comes up later, it's totally fine. So, okay, so I summarized what annual planning is, and now quickly we're gonna get into your Q1 planning. So January 1st to March 31st, what are we gonna do? So one thing that I did that I did not put in this is once I finished my broad desired outcomes, I already did, like, I had just a sheet of paper and I did Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and I kind of told the story of what my year would be like. So looking at the broad desired outcomes, I broke them down by quarter. So for each desired outcome, what would I do in Q1? What would I do in Q2, Q3, Q4? Of course, this was more for me to give myself kind of a, when I said here, that's basically what I said here in mapping out your commitments, right, and your activities and creating some timelines, right? So I did that. It was useful for me. I'm visual and I like to see how things would flow from one quarter to the other. But we need to be flexible because things change and it's very hard for us. That's why there is really no more like 3 to 5 year planning happening, because things happen so fast and we need to be able to kind of pivot rapidly. So we don't know what's going to happen next year in November. We can have these ideas, but just be gentle with yourself and the fact that it's probably going to evolve. So goals, quarterly planning. So area of focus. So area of focus and theme or guiding word is not the same. I will share with you on the next slide what I mean by area of focus. And then we're much more specific in our desired outcomes. Can you give example of one outcome and how you broke them? Oh, how I broke them down? For me, Myrna, you want to know how it was very, very general. I was very general. So just maybe I can give you a very general example. So this year we're starting a podcast, okay? So what elements are we going to do in Q1 versus what are we going to do in Q2, Q3, Q4? It's not just I'm launching a podcast. Well, there are some steps in launching the podcast, right? There's, what's our concept? Who's the team? What are we going to do about it? So that's what we're going to do in Q1, right? And we're going to book interviews. Then in Q2, I'm hoping, if everything goes according to plan, that we will launch our first series of interviews and do the promo. In the summer, we're going to look at what worked, what didn't in our first season, and we're going to plan for and then we're going to start approaching people for interviews in the fall. And then in the fall, if everything goes well, we're going to go with second season, right? So that's how. So our broad desired outcome is to launch a podcast. Like, oh, how was your year, Kat? Great year. We launched a podcast. Broad desired outcome. Now, breaking it down, what are the different phases of launching a podcast? And now, as I move into my Q1 goal setting, I can ask, okay, so what is my desired outcome? So maybe my desired outcome is I want to have at the end of Q1 a whole a set of, I want to have I want to have the concept, right, and the first 6 interviews of my podcast recorded with a marketing plan. Okay, so maybe that's it, right? And then my action plan, right? What do I need to do, right? Or maybe my desired outcome is I have a podcast that's ready to launch. And my action plan is I need a concept, I need the tech tools, I need the team, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that, okay? And then processes, tasks, when is it going to happen? So we're gonna put together a calendar. I have a team member who's gonna be assigned to that. He's gonna put together a calendar, and he's gonna be making sure that things are happening and when it's happening, okay? Does that help you, Myrna? Thank you for the feedback on the podcast. Actually, you guys are the ones who've inspired me to do it, because every time I give an interview on podcast, I get a really positive feedback. And I totally understand that when you guys are in the studio, you like to listen to stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. And we're going to have a great new team member to support us, and I can't wait to introduce him to you guys. Okay, so Myrna, I'm guessing that it's okay. Okay, so area of focus. Area of focus, where are you going to put your energy, okay? Art and cocktails, I love that. Kind of I've never heard about art and cocktails. I need to go check it out, because that's kind of the direction I'm going. Although I have no idea what art and cocktails is by Create Magazine, but that's kind of something. Anyway, I'm going to check it out. Anyway, coming back to what we're talking about, focusing on you. I was just giving an example of me to help with Myrna. Hopefully that was helpful. Area of focus. So we were talking about this yesterday with Andrea, right? So what are we going to focus on to move the needle, right? How are we going to bridge the gap that we identified in our doing our SWOT analysis? Usually, in my experience, it falls within one of these three categories. Sometimes you guys come up with something else. But when we distill it, usually it comes to one of these three areas. And so either it's because you need to attract more leads, right? If you keep launching and you're not getting results, I don't think doing another launch is going to make a big difference unless you change something in how you're processing your launch or how you're doing a show, right? My next show will sell. Well, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's probably not going to sell. Is it because you need to bring more people in? Is it because you need to convert the people who are coming in, right? Or maybe you're attracting a lot of people to your shows, but it's not the right people. They're not buying, right? Or is it because you just don't have, systems in place, operational systems, capacity, artwork, right? We talked about this again. If you go into a store and there's just one item hanging on the wall and there's nothing else in that store, you're just like thinking that store is going out of business. I'm out of here. I'm not going to buy something here, right? So maybe you need to create more work, you need more capacity. That applies for some of you. Others will, Andrea's like, that's me. For others, sometimes I hear I need to create more work. I need to focus on creating more work as a way to create resistance. Like it's a resistance mechanism because that's what you know and that's what you feel comfortable doing. So you're just like, I need more work. I need more work. Although you have more than enough work to show and sell. So we just need to be honest with ourselves about this. Okay. So quarterly, determine area of focus. Then again, picture yourself March 31st and set 1 to 3 goals. They have to be specific and measurable so that we know when we've reached them. And if it's difficult for you to just put a number, then have different scenarios, good, better, best scenarios. Okay. So again, my example, have a podcast that's ready to go live by March 31st. Okay. Specific, it's measurable. Is it realistic? Probably not. And then good, better, best scenarios, right? Maybe a good scenario, a best scenario is ready to go live. Maybe a better scenario is we have a concept. We don't have the interview. You have half the interviews done. And good is we have the concept. We'll do the interviews early Q2. Okay, just this different way. If it's artwork, you can quantify the number. Like maybe you want to create a whole series. So maybe you can quantify that. If you have a show, it can be like, I want to produce a show by the end of the quarter, participate in a group show. Okay, so it's not about creating judgment or setting yourself for failure. We're setting ourselves up for success. And then we just break it down, right? Again, it's always about the more you break it down. So do you see like the pattern here that I keep, like I talk, I've been talking for an hour, but it's just about narrowing it down, right? Breaking it to bite-sized chunks that are easy to implement. Okay? So this template I shared with you last time, I'm sharing it with you again, right? You could put your goals here, the strategies to reach your goals, and then what you're going to do more specifically. Again, you see, we're going here and we're breaking it down. Vision, area of focus, goal, strategy, processes. Monthly debriefs. It's a very simplistic way of doing it. I prefer just going through my notebook and debriefing in my notebook. It's really up to you. Okay. This is like the simple version of everything that I talked about today, okay? Do your debrief and do your vision and mission journaling, SWOT analysis, identifying gaps, number one. Decide on your guiding theme, broad desired outcomes for 2020, map out project plans, budget, and metrics for 2020, and then create your 90-day plan. How does this feel for you? Excited, overwhelmed? Tell me in the chat box how it feels, okay? Because I want to know. I'm a geek in the way that these things like I enjoy, but I know it's not the case for everyone. So I'm here to help you make this as painless as possible. I'm not going to go through all the how does it feel and everything like that. I just want to remind you this one little thing, and then we can go on for Q&A. I can do a good half hour of Q&A if you want. Remember to focus on identity, beliefs, and habits first, and the results will follow. What do I mean by that? Asking yourself, who do I need to become? What do I need to believe? What habits do I need to put in place to become the successful person that I want to be? Because otherwise, it's just words on paper and it's not going to turn too much. Okay, so change comes from within. The tools that I'm giving you is to help you set up those habits. But if you're not in a place where you're looking at what needs to be changed from within, if there's a lot of negative self-talk, if there's a lot of insecurity, it's going to be difficult for you to push through the resistance to get the results that you want. So April says, excited, feels good to have a plan, wonderful. Okay, Jessica says, I need to break this down for myself. It's a little overwhelming. Okay, Jessica, so what I want you to do is to book some time in your calendar. And it doesn't have to be really long periods. Okay, so, here, remember what I put here, okay? So maybe for each item, you book half an hour in your calendar. So 4 half-hour session. And you put a timer, and whatever you do during that half hour, that's it, okay? Because you can spend, 20 minutes on doing a SWOT analysis, and you can spend 2 hours, but the truth is between the 20 minutes and the 2 hours, the 1 hour and 40 minutes in between is just not gonna be that powerful, okay? So my recommendation for you guys is book short amounts. Book them like you would book your kid's dentist appointment. You wouldn't miss your kid's dentist appointment, right? So book them 20, 30 minutes and write in your calendar, half an hour to debrief on 2019, half an hour to do, my broad desired outcomes for 2020. And just so that you just do it like that, and it doesn't have to be all pretty with color codes and things like that. It's just so that you give yourself just something to look at, something to look back to, because your debrief sessions and your planning sessions are going to become so much quicker and easier if you do them regularly, because you'll have that information in your book, okay? So you're saying, I like that idea. Wonderful, okay? So that's really like putting it in your calendar, and not just putting, I'm going to plan, and like, for me, I just put a planning session in my calendar because I love it, and it's not like I don't have resistance toward it, and I know exactly what to do, so that's fine. But for you guys, if there's resistance, be super clear, and then once you've done it, if you put 30 minutes to debrief on 2019 and you did it on 20 minutes, great, you have 10 minutes off for you, okay? So the idea is to respect the timeline that you put yourself, and it doesn't have to be like this huge thing, okay? Brian says, a little overwhelming, but that is because I have a few intangibles that I cannot control. Wonderful. So what I want you to do, Brian, is to acknowledge the intangibles that you don't control, right? And when you're doing your planning, like I said at the early beginning, really just focus on the elements that you do control. And if there are too many, and if there are some aspects that you you need to factor in, but they're still very difficult to see where it's going to go. Just have these good, better, best scenarios, put different scenarios. So when I did my budget for 2020, I did 3 versions with different scenarios. And then I continued my research. I talked to some partners, blah, 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 and then I narrowed it down. And now I have one budget. Doesn't mean it's not going to evolve. It's a budget. It's not what's going to happen. It's not reality. It's a budget. But I did 3 scenarios at first, because at first I wasn't able to, I needed to see those 3 scenarios to decide. Okay, so those are different ways. Okay. Okay, perfect. So you're working on 2, maybe a 3rd. Perfect. Whatever works for you. Myrna says, I've been here for some time and still resisted, but I know it's what I need. Maybe want to revisit my vision, and why, especially motivation, as I'm not motivated by money. Money is not a motivator. We think it is, it isn't. And Myrna, something I want you to think about, and we've had this conversation, I think it was with Kathleen. You need to get back to painting, Myrna. You need to get back to painting. So maybe that's something, maybe that because you've been working a lot on your business, you've been pushing, but you need to paint. Okay, so maybe that's something to consider this year. Just something that came up for me that I wanted to share with you. Andrea says, feels overwhelming because I'm not living from my art yet. I have made some money with my art, but not much, but really excited to plan this new adventure. Yes, and like I was telling Brian at the beginning, right? It's step by step. It's not, oh, I haven't made a dime last year. I'm gonna hit myself on the head and say I'm not good enough. And then I'm gonna plan that next year investments are gonna stay the same, but I'm gonna make $300,000, right? And it's just makes no sense, right? So we need to see this as something that's going to evolve, and the more organized you are with your vision and what it is that you want to achieve, the quicker you're going to get to it. Yano said, I need to basically restart. I got a good amount of planning done from 2019. Just need to debrief. Okay. Go through last year material to see if anything changed since my brain says no to work due to burnout. Yes. And really, that's a really good point, Yano, right? We're not going to go, we don't want to repeat. Like, we need to learn from our lessons that life throws at us. So if you've been, burning the candle from both ends, if you were tired, if you burned out, then definitely, like I was talking to Jessica about the SWOT analysis, we need to go and find what the root cause of it is. Otherwise, we're just setting ourselves up for the same thing over and over again. Okay. Andrea Walter says, I'll be working on my brand message. So that's exciting. Yes, it is. Myrna, thanks. Yes, that's what I want to focus on these 2 quarters. I ignored it last year and focused more on business. Yeah, but there's no business if there's no art, right? And well, for some people, there can be art without a business. But if you're here, clearly it's because you want to turn a profit, but you can't if there's no new art, if people aren't seeing you create. It's kind of the same example I was giving. If you go into a store and there's just one item there, you're not really going to trust that store, that it's going to stay in business for very long. You're probably going to turn around and go to another business to get whatever you were looking for. So yes, you need to create work, because that creates also trust from your audience and your followers and your clients. All righty. I'm done. I know it's a lot. Okay, I know it's a lot, and I just walked through this like it's a walk in the park. So I know that it's a lot. So what I'm going to suggest, so we did it last quarter. Now I'm going to do it a little bit differently for this quarter. I'm going to post on the Facebook group really a space where you can share your guiding word for 2020. You can share any questions that you have about your planning process, so that it doesn't end up in different places and I don't see it. We're all going to put it on one post. I'm going to do this right after this call. I'm going to put one post there, and we can have these conversations that are specific to you. Like I've had the opportunity to get to know many of you quite well. We've had a chance to talk. So if you're unsure, I'm not going to tell you what your guiding word should be, because that needs to come from you, because that needs to kind of motivate you. So don't ask me like, what do you think my guiding word should be, because I can't help you with that. But I can help you for your just the wording for your desired outcomes, for your goal setting. I can help you with the right strategies to reach your goals. If you're not sure where the gap is, why you're not reaching your goals, I'm happy to have these conversations with you. Okay. There's no good or bad question. Just don't ask me to do it for you, because I can't. But the rest, I'm more than happy to help you with that. So before we go, because I want to be respectful with everybody's time, is there any other question, comments, concern, uncertainties, anything that you would like to ask me? But again, I understand if you need some time to think about it. We'll have plenty of time to discuss it. If there's one thing I want you to do after this call, once we hang up, is to take your calendar or a calendar and book some time to do this. If it's the only thing you do today, and exactly what you're going to do. Okay, don't just write planning, but write what you're going to be doing, what element of planning you'll be doing, and how much time you're allocating for it. Once you've done that, just be super proud, because it's already so much more than any other artist is doing out there. So just for that, I want to congratulate you all. Okay. Marley says, thank you for the session. It really helped. I'm going to post on Facebook, which I will have many questions, need some suggestions. Perfect, Nile. So just wait for me to post that, so that way we can all have it at the same place. And I can give feedback, but all of you have your own experiences, so please do share your feedback. You're very welcome, Yano. I'm super happy that you're back to work too, and I'm happy to see you here. It's been a pleasure to chat with you all, and don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here for you. All these different ways. Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye. Thanks for coming.